Welcome back to That Rugby Podcast, hosted by the Sports Booth. You've got myself and Hughesy back again for another week.
G'day.
Our teams did not feature this weekend. However, always rugby going on at this time of the year, especially with warm-up games to a Rugby World Cup in 46 days, I now believe it is.
It's getting close.
So, yeah, a little over a month before kickoff of the first game. But two big games. Actually, I wanted to touch base on something. Our last podcast has done quite well on the YouTubes, getting over, I think it was like 2,000 views.
Oh,
However,
wow.
a lot of people were commenting on us bashing the referees. Now, that was a lot aimed at you because you're the Australian that was, having a sook. But I'm going to step, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to step and take a bullet for you because, first of all, every single nation has been in that position with a referee.
Yeah.
Now, I can remember throughout my childhood hearing the name Wayne Barnes and feeling distaste as a New Zealand All Blacks fan. Was that right? Of course not. Of course it wasn't right. But it was what it was. And again, I think we've come a long way with referees. I really do.
Yeah.
But I think they've still got a long way to go. I think a referee union. If you have watched one of our other podcasts, many of the other ones, you know how highly we do talk of referees. Yep. Obviously, I thought also Jaco Piper didn't have a great game with Aussie against Argentina, but I'll let you tell your side of the story as well.
Yeah, look, it's one of those things, and it's what I said in the last podcast really is that as critical as I'm going to be of Jaco Piper, you can't take it that step further where people abuse and bash the referees, right? It's the thing, like, it's what people always say about free speech and how they get it wrong. Like, oh, I have free speech, so you can't say that. It's like, oh, you can't say anything negative about the referees. No, all right? Just because you can't abuse and bash them doesn't mean they're not immune from criticism. You can still be critical of their performance, just as you can be critical of players' performance, all right? Anytime there's an element of performance or human interaction, or even, with automated performances and actions, you can be critical of it. You could judge it and say it was good or it wasn't good. And his refereeing that game wasn't good. And I am confident in saying that because you, as a New Zealander, also expressed that you thought he didn't have one of his best games of refereeing, that he was stepping in too much. So, I mean, I stand by it fully. I mean, I don't think I said anything terribly offensive in that podcast. I haven't looked at any YouTube. I don't look at comments, so I'm not going to go and look at the YouTube comments. People could say what they want to say. But for clarity, look, refereeing is, I'm going to say this as well, which I said in previous episodes. So go back and watch those if you haven't, or listen to them if you haven't in the past, because they are worth a listen. Especially there's ones where we had a lot of discussion on the referee around the time when Rassie Rasmus sort of was taken down a peg for his comments about referees. Refereeing is probably the hardest job on a rugby field. It's probably the hardest job on a rugby field, right?
Yep.
Because you have to worry about every single player on the field, right? When you're playing on a rugby field, you don't have to worry about every single other player. You just have to worry about the other team and some of the people on your team, right? You don't have to be keeping an eye on everyone on your team, as well as the opposition team. And most of the time, you're not even keeping an eye on all of the opposition team either. You're looking at where the ball is. The referee's got to keep track of everything, along with his touchies and the upstairs referee and things like that. So it's the hardest job on the field. That means that occasionally people are not going to do a very good job of it. That just is what it is. The same way that superstars are occasionally not going to have very good games. It just is what it is. We're all human. None of us are perfect, right? And that's my thoughts of what happened with Jaco Piper, right? He just injected himself in the game too much, was too trigger happy in pulling penalties. And the last try that Argentina scored, there should have been a review of the knock on the play before scoring the try, because that is a significant part of that play's development, right? And I don't think it's even 2 or 3 plays before the try happened. It's the play before the try happened. That has to be within the review window. And if it's not, then that's a large discussion that needs to happen. But look, I stand by what I said. I think that he should have done a better job, and it is what it is. If you don't like that, well, you can start your own podcast and talk about it on there.
I'm going to agree with all the YouTube comments and say you're just a whining Aussie who couldn't get the job done.
Look, and I mean, that's what I said in the podcast as well. Like, it was, there's so many opportunities that we could have gotten it done to not make it down to refereeing decisions, and we didn't. So don't get me wrong, it's not all on Jaco Piper. There's a lot of work for the Aussies to do as well. 100%. I 100% agree with those YouTube comments as well, right? And that's what we're seeing, and what we're going to talk about later, changes that have happened to the Australian squad. Because you'll notice, if people really listen to that podcast, you'll notice that Jaco Piper isn't the only person I was critical of in that game.
Tom Wright.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, just had a bit of but let's get on to the games that happened in the weekend. Then we talk about, obviously, the Bledisloe that is coming up. A couple of key points there. But 2 games happened on the weekend. Fiji versus Tonga, Samoa versus Japan. I should say Japan versus Samoa, but Fiji hosted Tonga, Japan hosted Samoa. I should know this. Where did Fiji host Tonga? Because my assumption is the fact that they've won, it was in Suva, baby, because they don't lose in Suva. No Fijian team.
Let me have a look here. You keep
I'll keep going
chatting
with this, Ryan,
and I'll research, right?
Yeah, because, and again, Hughesy's going to do the research for me, but I believe, and this statistically is probably not right, but
it was not in Suva. It was in Lautoka.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, what I was going to say is no Fijian team has ever lost in Suva, which is probably not factually correct, but it sounds good. And the Jura have made it a fortress. So even though it wasn't in Suva, Fiji got up. Fiji, I think, had named the better squad. This was obviously their first time coming together. Tonga had the game against Australia A last week, and we're missing a couple of players. Israel Folau won. I was really impressed by Tonga again. Tonga have come a long way, and I think, honestly, the best thing World Rugby's done is these eligibility laws, like just seeing a player like Vai Fafita be able to put on a Tonga jersey. Like, I think 3 years stand down is more than enough time for, not to be selected and to make it all fair. Seeing Folau, Piatau, Vai Fafita, it makes me so happy seeing those players play. Vai Fafita was huge. Put some massive hits on a strong Fijian team. Saying that, Fiji played really well. A couple of superstars. I'm excited to see what the Pacific nations are going to be able to do at this World Cup. There's a lot of flair there, but a lot of good first 5 fly half play happening. And I saw this with a bit of Caleb Muntz, who played for the Jura and started for Fiji, played a full game for Fiji this weekend and played really well. We've also got Christian Leali'ifano at Samoa now, and William Havili, who's had Moana Pacifica play for Super Rugby, now playing for Tonga, didn't start this weekend either. So look, if I'm Tonga here, I'm not that worried. If I'm Fiji, I'm not that worried. It was a great first hit out, great for Pacific Rugby to be playing there in Fiji. I was impressed by it all.
100%. It's always good to see. Look, this is a time. Look, rugby is doing something right. It seems like both rugby union and rugby league are realizing that the Pacific nations are a big part of building their future. I guess rugby union's got the advantage as well of growing the game in other locations as well. So it's good to see that they're not leaving the Pacific nations behind.
I was thinking this when I was watching that game. Watching the highlights of that game, I should say. I didn't watch it live. But if New Zealand ever does host a Rugby World Cup again, there should be some games hosted in the islands. I would love even just some games in, Pacific and one in Fiji, one in Samoa, one in Tonga or something like that. One game each for each of those teams in their pool just would be a fantastic little thing. I don't know if New Zealand will host another Rugby World Cup. I think we may be just on the too smaller side. I think we will eventually, but we are on the smaller side in revenue generating form to probably host one, but hopefully do. And if they do, they should take it out to the Pacifics. The second game was Samoa beating Japan. A red card in the 30th minute to Michael Leach really set this one up for a Samoan win. Again, I'm high on Samoa again. Leali'ifano looked good. The pact looked incredible. If you go back and watch that game and you see the scrummaging, Samoa will be very happy and Japan will be very worried. They just absolutely demolished them in the scrums. It was like a half a second. Japan had to put it in and get it out. And to get over the line in Japan, even with, a 14, one-player advantage, 15 against 14 for 15 minutes, I was just impressed that the Samoa side were able to do it and able to hold their nerve and come away with the win. For Japan, I'm not overly worried. They still look like the better team in this game. However, this is 2 pretty bad losses to All Blacks XV. Now a loss to Samoa. it's not the greatest preparation. That we all know they peak at a Rugby World Cup. They're becoming very South Africa-like. But it hasn't been the best, I guess, time for Japanese rugby from the 2019 World Cup to this World Cup coming up.
Yeah, 100%. I think they will feel disappointed that they haven't had better results given the way that they played in that World Cup. Yeah, I mean it's a tough one as well. They'll probably but instead of being whinging Aussies, they'll be whinging Japanese, complaining about refereeing decisions costing them the game.
The Japanese don't whinge, bud. They don't whinge. They don't even boo when a guy goes to do a goal kick, bud. They're not going to be whinging.
That's one thing as well. I have to say, I love Japanese fans for the way that they behave in stadiums as well. You know, picking up rubbish, not booing when people go to take kicks and stuff. I love that. I love that kind of stuff.
You Aussies could learn, a thing or two from them.
I think everyone in the world except for Japan could learn a thing or two from that. Yeah, I think it's really great. You know who could really learn a lot from them? England fans. England fans could learn a lot from them. Not complaining about their own weather.
Learn a lot from anyone.
Yeah, they could learn how to speak English from a lot of other countries. They could probably learn how to speak English from the Japanese. I guess we should talk about the cards in this game. So you've actually put up a really good video on the Sports Booth Instagram page, which you guys should go and check out if you haven't. And you might cut it into the YouTube video here. I don't know, you're a whiz with editing and stuff, but essentially, Michael Leach goes in. He's not lowering. He's not really looking to wrap. Yes, the Samoan player is tackled by another tackler first, and it sort of bumps him a little bit. But from the video you've got up and from the audio I'm hearing from it, I think they got that call right. Because you can't consider the first tackler a mitigating factor if you're never in if you're never in a position to make a legal tackle in the first place. Like, it's not like he's going in for a legal tackle and the player's been bumped into a shoulder. No, he's coming in, his arm's sort of down by his side, his hands loosely in front of him. It's really shoddy technique. And that's what's costed him there.
Yeah.
Opposing that is the Taleni Sue tackle. And I think that, again, the referee they explained it well, especially with the captions you've got on the video there. You could see that Sue is going low for the tackle. The Japanese player lowers himself, but Sue still collects him around the head, so it is still a yellow. Maybe could have been a penalty for just high contact, but considering that's how they're ruling head contact these days, it's yellow. I'm fine with it. Arguably, I guess it's hard in the situation. When you're coming in to make a legal tackle and then someone ducks into your shoulder and they hit their head on your shoulder, I could see how you could feel hard done by.
Yeah.
But that's what the game is these days. So,
Yeah.
See, guys, I'm not just bashing referees all the time.
No, I mean, I agree a lot with what you said. I think Michael Leach's one, I think he would have eventually wrapped the arm. I do think he would have eventually wrapped the arm if he made contact, but there was no doubt there was nowhere else he could have contacted except for the head. Like, that shoulder was always hitting the head. So I understand why it's a red card. I don't think, like you said, I think it was just sloppy technique rather than an intentional hit. But it does bring up the question, technique for tackling is going to have to, because like a team that you normally would expect to be, on the ball with their tackling technique, Japan, they lose a player. I see a lot of comments in our YouTubes as well about, this World Cup's going to be decided by cards, and it's not going to be decided by cards. It's going to be decided by tackling technique more than cards, I think. Yeah,
100%, especially considering that they're not putting in the 20-minute red card for the World Cup.
Yeah, totally, which I think is a good decision. I'm a fan of the 20-minute red card, and again, I think there should be an orange card where it's something not dangerous, not dangerous, but not intentional, and is something that, just happens in the game. Let's say Sue's one, he is going, or that's a try-saving tackle. He's going for the try-saving tackle. He goes to make a wrap, and there's contact with the head, and by law, it has to be a red card or something like that. Or a Caleb Clark one from when he went to charge down a kick and his hip made contact with Moana Pacifica player a couple of years ago. Those ones, I'm like, that should be a 20-minute red card. Like, he shouldn't be able to come back on, but there's no intention to hurt, anything like that. And then you have the full red card for where it's like, this is a dangerous play. It's sloppy tackle technique. It's sloppy that, bang. But I don't mind it. I think it's holding teams accountable to their tackle technique. And I think we've been doing this for long enough now that you know the consistency of the refs. Like that like you said, both of those decisions were right, I think, in the scheme of things. So, look, yeah, it happens. It's just interesting that they're losing a key player like that could cost you a Rugby World Cup game. No doubt about that. And again, I would say 5, 6 times out of 7, 8 times out of 10, Japan probably beat Samoa, but a red card will change that.
Yep, 100%.
Let's get on to the Bledisloe. Obviously, last round of the Rugby Championship happening this week. Argentina versus South Africa in South Africa. But the one that everyone's got on their mind is the All Blacks versus the Wallabies at the G. Boland takes 6 at the G. It's going to be a big game. But before that, Eddie has made some bigger calls.
Made some squad changes. He's made the right call by leaving Tom Wright. Well, actually, no. I don't think he's made the right call by leaving Tom Wright completely out of the squad, because I think, as we've discussed, Tom Wright has a role as a winger. So I think Eddie's actually made a wrong call here by leaving Tom Wright out of the squad and leaving Suliasi Vunivalu in. I think Tom Wright could be in the squad as a winger, as a backup winger. I think Korobede and Nwangani Tawase are your wingers. No question. For me, that last game against Argentina sort of sealed it. Those are the 2 best wingers for Australia, right? Where we've got question marks coming into this game is outside centre and fullback. So Len Ikitau's out 6 to 8 weeks with that shoulder injury, which is really rough for him, which is really, really rough, because that puts him very borderline for the World Cup. Very, very borderline. And might rule out his chances completely, depending on however either Parisi or Pataya steps up. So either Izzy Parisi or Jordan Pataya could play 13, because equally either Jordan Pataya or Andrew Kellaway could play 15 for the Wallabies. If I was Eddie, if I'm putting on my bald cap to play Eddie, not that I have that far to go, but if I'm putting on my hairless cap to play Eddie, I'm thinking Kellaway at 15, because I think Kellaway needs to be in the squad. He is, of all active Wallabies, he scored the most tries against the All Blacks. He's the active try scoring leader against the All Blacks for Australia. And I think he is a better fullback than Pataya is. For outside centre, I don't think you could go wrong with either Parisi or Pataya. I don't think you could go wrong with either of them. I'm pretty split on that one, because I'm not sure if it's just my Waratahs bias that would rather Parisi in there, because equally Patai's had some explosive plays against the All Blacks in concert with Kellaway as well. I remember specifically from the last Bledisloe. So I'm torn on the outside centre.
I'm going to jump in here and give you my opinion, because I'm not biased by New South Wales Waratahs. First of all, I like that he's left Vunivalu in the squad. Look, I've always been big on Vunivalu. I'm a Vunivalu supporter. I know I don't have to go through the pain of watching him fumble and struggle and go through these growing pains, but I think he's going to be a great winger. At some point, when that happens, it may be too late and he may be back in the NRL, but I think he will get there at some point. So I don't mind that he's left him in the squad. I think Kellaway at fullback's the easy choice. Yeah. I think the reason he's let Wright go as well was because Pataya can play. I assume it'll be like a bench spot for Pataya, because he can play wing, fullback, and centre. I would be starting Parisi at centre. There's no doubt that Pataya. I can't even remember when his last game was, because he was out injured for a while.
Yeah.
Look, to me, he played most of the red season over at fullback or wing. He hasn't had a lot of experience at centre. To chuck him into the G without the experience of playing at centre, where we saw what Argentina did to Karevi, who's a great defender at 13, I think Parisi is the answer, just purely out of, because he's played at centre the whole season. Even though it wasn't his best season, I would say, he's played games there. He
had really good moments. He's sort of derailed a bit by injury as well. Like, particularly towards the back end of the season.
Exactly. He came back
from that knee injury, he was really good. And he got injured again, obviously nothing as significant as last year, but he was electric for the Waratahs when he was on. Okay, look, I'm glad it's not my Waratahs bias that's making me lean towards Parisi then.
No, mate. It's both of us here. Agree.
Yeah. Then then the other big question for me is this the game where Eddie pulls the trigger on Carter Gordon? Because because Quade Cooper at the moment is a cow in a meat factory at the moment. It's just a matter of time before someone puts the trigger and takes him out, right? It puts in Carter Gordon in his place. Whether it's this game or whether Eddie doesn't do it for the Rugby Championship and holds it for the World Cup, who knows? I'd rather Eddie do it now in the Rugby Championship, so Carter Gordon's blooded starting and is the guy for the Wallabies. He just is the guy. There's no questions about it. He's not worrying while he's at the World Cup. He has time to take command of the squad in the period between now and the World Cup. So I'd rather Eddie get it over and done with. I think what you sort of said last time, your arguments in the last podcast for starting Carter Gordon were very good. For leaving Quade in for this one and then starting Carter Gordon over in New Zealand with no pressure on whatsoever. I mean, I feel like there's not that much pressure for this one anyway, because Australia hasn't won a game in the Rugby Championship. We can't win the Rugby Championship.
Eddie's just called it a pre-season build up for the World Cup, hasn't he? So exactly. No pressure on the players.
Yeah. So I wouldn't mind seeing him start for this one. And also starting in front of a friendly crowd. Marky Mark hadn't ever played for Australia in Australia, because last year he only got to play overseas. It's the same with a couple of the other Australian players that are relatively young. They hadn't ever played in Australia before, and I think that's really big, is to have a good home crowd for your first start. So and especially it's in his home city as well, in Melbourne, where he plays,
where the Rebels will
rugby.
Get behind
he
him.
Knows the ground, so I'd love for him to start.
Does he know the MCG?
I'm sure he's been out there for a trot.
I would be surprised if they let the Rebels out on the MCG, bud. Like, let's be honest. We see how Super Round goes.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Look, I'm sure he's gone over there and had one of the wanky Melbourne coffees looking at the MCG. I'm sure they've strolled along it, because it's the Bledisloe, right? He probably hasn't been there for the Rebels, but since the Bledisloe was announced there, I'm sure they've allowed the rugby players to go have a check around there. In the forwards, there's some questions as well, and there's some changing of pieces. It's mainly people are focusing on the changes in the backs, but the forwards are equally as important. Particularly, a couple of surprise outs. One of them being Pete Samu is probably the most significant one. Josh Kameni as well being out of the squad sort of surprised me, because I didn't think he had a bad game against Argentina by any means. But we've also got out of the squad Zane Nongo, Reece Hodge, and Matt Gibbon. So thinking about what possible reason Eddie could have to have Pete Samu not in the squad, I imagine probably resting and rotating and looking at other players, looking at different combinations, with maybe Holloway coming in at 6 and things like that. And then also trying to see how Lange Gleeson goes, because Lange Gleeson's in the squad now. So I think it's just a pure rotational thing. As you quoted him just before, he sees this as a pre-season training camp to the Rugby World Cup. So he's got to get fit all of his pieces in there at some point. I think he knows what he's got in Pistol Pete Samu. He's a very good, consistent player. I think he needed to see what Lange Gleeson could potentially bring. So, and I think this is where we might see Bobby V in the 6 jersey then, and then Lange at 8. Hooper is a stretch to make the game, apparently. So we'll see who starts at 7. I would say probably McWright. And yeah, we'll see what happens,
So yeah, and New Zealand, I think, will be a very similar team to what we've seen. They've released a bunch of players back to Mitre 10 Cup teams and stuff like that. Cam Roigard, Sean Stevenson. So it'll just depend who they set up on the wings, and what first 5 I guess they go for. But I imagine it's going to be a very similar team as we build for the Rugby World Cup. So the question to you, Hughesy, can these Wallabies do it at the MCG?
Of course, we won our last 2 games at the MCG, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, we're on a winning streak at the MCG, of course.
Should go in as favourites, surely.
Yeah, surely we're favourites. Surely we're favourites. I mean, look, they've got can they do it? Yes, of course. Of course. Any team can beat any team. Of course. You can never say with 100% certainty a team can't win, because it's not how mathematics work. So can the Australians do it? Of course. Will they do it? That's up to them. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it is up to, I think this game, more than I think it's the same with Australia always, right? Is they've got the talent there. They do have talented players. They have got good players, but it comes down to discipline and penalties. And yes, as much as you can say that Jaco Piper was jumping in a lot and things like that as well, equally, and I said it in the last podcast. Make sure you listen carefully. Australia puts themselves in positions as well to where they get penalised or where they make bad calls. It's discipline. It's a thing that's been affecting Australian rugby for a little while now. So I think there is the talent there to do it for sure, but it's up to the players to have the discipline, the mental strength and will, and the confidence to do it. So yes, they can do it, but they've got to do it themselves. And I threw out last year to the Australian players during the spring tour that if they won 3 out of 5 games, to take them all out for ice cream, right? If Wallaby squad, if you guys win in Melbourne, I'll take you all out for ice cream. Official, Eddie included, because everyone knows he's a fiend for ice cream. He racks up a hefty bill at Gelato Messina every time he's there. But I will take out the Wallabies to Gelato Messina if they win in Melbourne.
Oh, good man, Hughesy. It's not going to happen, so don't worry about it. Your bank account's safe. On to the under-20s, the Rugby Championship. So I think as a whole collective, SANZAAR saw what happened at the under-20 championship, the third, 5, 7, and I think Argentina were 9th maybe, and went, you know what? This ain't good enough. They've got their Six Nations rumbling up north that are getting their players a little taste of international rugby. Why the fuck don't we do it? And so they've gone ahead and said, yes, we are going to do an under-20, the Rugby Championship.
Amazing.
My assumption is going to be it's going to happen in one location each year and go around for the 4 years. I think that would be
that'd be good.
That would be awesome. Like, again, it doesn't take them having to travel lots of places. It's one location. You play a game every 5 days for the 3 weeks, and it ticks off a really good tournament.
It'd be a good thing to go watch as well, similar to Rugby Sevens, you know?
Totally. Get the atmosphere up. 2 games in one day, then everything like that. It would, on weekends you'd say it was in Australia, you'd have one in Melbourne, one in Sydney, one in Brisbane or in Perth or whatever. And in New Zealand, you have 1 weekend in Auckland, 1 weekend in Wellington, 1 weekend in Otago. I just think that works really well. I hope they set it up like that. But we will wait and see and announce more details. When that comes, I'm sure the All Blacks will be expecting to take home. Should we have it? We should surely get an under-20s Bledisloe going because, you need some other Bledisloe to win because you're not winning this one.
Bledisloe Junior.
Bledisloe Junior, and it's just a miniature trophy, just a miniature one, and then,
It's under 20 inches tall.
Talking about New Zealand and Australia, Bledisloe's ANZAC XV.
Come here, my brother.
Maybe not. I'm hugging you too now, virtually.
Yeah.
Look, it's been chucked about. However, I want to touch base. It's going to be an Australian A team plus New Zealand players that aren't playing for the All Blacks.
Yeah.
But then now Eddie's come out and said he doesn't really want to touch any New Zealander because he thinks they've got cooties or something like that. I don't know. It was something along those lines. But yeah, so look, if it does happen, it'll be awesome. I think it's a great idea to get New Zealanders over for the British and Irish Lions tour, to get a bit more of that magic. I would love to see actually one of these games be New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, because since that's the 3 teams that the British and Irish Lions tour, I think it would be really cool to make up a XV of them every single time and have one more, like an invitational test match just about. So, look, I love the idea.
It's great. And look, we could finally sit down for a game and cheer for the same team.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, that would be a rare occurrence.
Yeah, very rare occurrence.
I guess if we ever finished we're in the same pool and we needed the other team to win a game to knock the other team, another team out, where it's the only other time we would cheer for each other. But we don't. Have we ever been in the same Rugby World Cup pool? I'm going to say
I can't imagine so.
Because it's done on rankings, it doesn't matter where we. But I don't think we have. If I'm running my, I don't we only meet in quarterfinals, semi-finals, and finals. Look at us, we only met on the big stage. But, I can't remember a time. I'm going to assume not.
Can't remember either.
This draw is, is I actually, funnily enough, I rewatched the draw of the Rugby World Cup, the coaches' reactions to it, and what I found really funny from this was the fact that you had Eddie Jones at England, Piviak at Wales. You also had the Fijian coach, Vern Cotter's no longer there.
Dave Rennie for Australia.
Dave Rennie for Australia. I was just sitting there and I was like, this is the dumbest shit in the world that it was done this early. Like, take all the draw and stuff out of it, just seeing coaches who are no longer coaching those teams reacting to the work. Like, I just blew my mind. I just sat there and went, what the fuck is happening? But yeah, entertaining at least. So yeah, do the draw later, Rugby World Cup. Last point for today, obviously Bledisloe coming back. I thought, let's ask ourselves a question. Let's see. If you could bring back one former player from your nation to play in this Bledisloe series, who would it be and why? So, for example, Richie McCaw at 7 for the All Blacks. He is not my player, but I'm going to let you go first.
For me, this is really tough because there's a lot of quality players that you could bring back. My first thought immediately was Stephen Larkham, was to have that incredible 10 again. But I think with Carter Gordon that we have someone. I was chatting with my dad over the weekend, and he sees a lot of Stephen Larkham and Carter Gordon. So Stephen Larkham's not my pick. And there's a few people that I'm sort of tossing around, right? One of them is Israel Folau. Israel Folau at his prime with the rest of this back line would be absolutely incredible. As good as Kellaway is, Israel Folau was on another level when he was playing. All right, arguably one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world at his peak. George Gregan is another one. Always able to get under New Zealanders' skin. Always coming up with great plays. John Eales is another really, big one that I was thinking about. It's really, really hard to decide. But I think if I could pick one former player at their prime, considering what it is not necessarily about the player, it's about considering the Australian squad that we have and where I see a little bit of a weakness that could be addressed, right? And that's actually at hooker, specifically at backup hooker, right? Parecki's done all right, but I think we can improve there. I think round the rest of the park, we're mainly okay for this one. However, my player, and I don't know if you would have ever seen this coming, is Stephen Moore. Stephen Moore back at his prime as starting hooker for the Wallabies, with Dave Parecki then coming off the bench. That way we've got two quality hookers ready to play for the Wallabies.
Stephen Moore. Definitely not who I would have picked.
I know, because he's not. But it's not about the player; it's about the team.
Totally, I like the thinking. You've thought about weaknesses, which obviously the Wallabies have quite a lot of, and you've targeted it, and you've done a good job. I think Stephen Moore was critically underrated, criminally underrated, should I say? I feel like he's a bit of a hooper. Always gave 100%, and just never seemed to get the results from it. Again, playing one of the best All Blacks teams of all times, it was tough for him. I had a long thought as well. Now, obviously, I look at the All Black squad and I go, weaknesses. And I go, weaknesses. Where are we weak at the moment? And I went, props, pretty fucking good. Hooker, yeah. Cody Taylor's back in form. And Samasoni is looking like a beast. Locks, well, we've got two of the best locks in the world with Sam Whitelock and Brody Retallick. Yes, they're getting a bit old. So maybe I go Sam Whitelock in his prime. But I was like, no.
Age him, yeah.
I was like, boom, someone came to my head, Jerome Kaino. I was like, yeah, we got a big number 6, really strong, will take it to the game. And then Shannon Frizzell went and fucking ran over Willie LaRue and sent him into the depths of hell. And I was like, okay, not needed. 7, Sam Cane. Could upgrade to Richie McCaw, but I like what Sam's Cane's doing. It's Sam Cane's time. It's not Richie McCaw's time. We're done with that. I then went 8. Well, Artie Savia, am I stupid? No, I'm in love with the man. 9, Aaron Smith, so I don't need anyone there. 10, two of the best 10s. 12, Geordie Barrett coming into his own. 13, Rikio Ioane. Fullback, Bowden Barrett. 1 wing, Will Jordan. And I said, there it is. Number 11 hasn't been fully selected or taken, and there's only one man for the job. bring on Jonah, put him on the wing. Imagine him with this back line, that physical freak, just running over Marky Mark and steamrolling past Andrew Callaway as he dots the ball down for a famous victory at the MCG.
Imagine though if Corabetti comes flying across. Imagine the collision between those two.
That would be a collision. That would start World War III, I reckon. That would be a couple of atomic bombs colliding and starting World War III.
It would be similar to when Krakatoa erupted. It'd be a shockwave heard thousands of miles away, right? Causing tidal waves, blowing out windows and things like that. Untying shoelaces, everything like that. It would be incredible. It'd be like, in Captain America Civil War, where there's like in the first Avengers movie where Thor hits his hammer on Captain America's shield. It'd be like that, where there's that shockwave and everyone just stops and just looks. It's just stops the fighting. Like the Wallabies and the All Blacks just all stop and just look, and just like everyone knows that they've just witnessed something magnificent. That's
what's the saying? Like the immovable.
An unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Yeah.
That's the one.
In this case, though, it's two unstoppable forces.
And both being, just incredible. So, man, that would be. I would love to see that. But we will unfortunately never. Rest in peace, Jonah. Anyway, we have a Bledisloe lined up this weekend. So join us again next Monday when we will be back on to discuss another famous All Black victory at the G. Can they make it 3 in a row? Can they do it?
Yeah, can the Wallabies... Look, if we win 3 games at the MCG in a row, that counts as a Bledisloe, right?
Yeah, where was that? That was written in the terms and conditions, wasn't it? Yeah. 3 games in a row at the MCG.
We're taking the England cricket logic in that, in the spirit of the game, we should have won. Bledisloe won last year, so it really felt like we won that one. So we won that one, and the game 2 doesn't really count. So if we win this one, that's 2 wins in a row, so we get the Bledisloe.
And
that's the England logic for you.
And like the English do it, when you were going to kick a goal, hit off a bat and ran away, and you actually got 100 points rather than the 10 points, and should have won. So
lots of mitigating English factors.
No, I mean it's going to be a good game. Like you said, it's 3 on the trot at the MCG. If you do get this win at the MCG, you might have to make it your home for Bledisloe's, as we've done with Eden Park. However, if you get this win at the MCG, it will make me highly nervous because we're going to Forsyth Bar, not Eden Park, for our game. So if there was ever a chance to win the Bledisloe, it's now. It is now.
Yeah, who knows?
It's now or never, baby. It's now or never.
I don't know about that. I don't know if it's now or never.
Oh, yeah, well, like how long before would we say that you're just not going to win it? Like how long?
It'll happen. It'll happen. We got some good young blokes coming through.
Oh, yeah, nice. Do you reckon that this could last longer than the Cubs not winning the World Series? Are we looking at like history? I think it was 108 years.
No, I don't think it's like that. Because the Cubs were cursed, weren't they, or something?
Yeah,
there was a guy that tried to bring his goat into the stadium or something.
Yeah, but now I'm starting to question, like, are the Wallabies cursed? Like, like the Holes movie, and like, how they're cursed there. And do you reckon, like, the first time they fired Eddie, the curse was put upon them because they haven't won a Bledisloe since 2003?
Yeah, could be, and maybe he
now
comes back and breaks the curse.
They're trying to bring him back. They're trying to get
the Shia LaBeouf. Yeah,
exactly. They're trying to get the curse broken through Eddie. Yeah.
Shia Jones, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. It could happen. It could happen. Yeah. Stranger things have happened.
Yes, they have.
But we'll see you all in 109 years when the All Blacks have not lost a Bledisloe. Thank you for joining us today on That Rugby Podcast. We'll be back again next week. I've been Luke. That's been Husey. Goodbye.
Peace.